Now, the lower river was about bank full. And if anyone had questioned my ability to run any crossing from Cairo to New Orleans without help or instruction, I would have been irreparably hurt. The idea of being afraid of any crossing in the line in the daytime, well, too preposterous for words. And one matchless summer day, I was bowling along down the bend above Island 66, brimful of self-complacency, carrying my nose about as high in the air as a giraffe's. And then Mr. Bixby said, I'm going to go below for a few minutes. You know how to run this next crossing? Well, that was almost an affront. This was about the simplest and plainest crossing in the whole river. Why, one couldn't come to harm here whether you ran it right or not. And as for depth, well, there never had been any bottom here. I knew all this perfectly well. I said, run it. I run it in my sleep. He said, how much water is there in it? I said, that's an odd question. Couldn't touch bottom here with a church steeple. He said, oh, you think so, do you? And then he turned around and walked out. Well, a few minutes later, I look down there, and I see the captain has come out onto the hurricane deck. A minute or so later, here comes the mate. A few moments later, a clerk, and every few moments, another straggler would join my audience, until by the time we got to the head of the island, there were 15 or 20 people down there under my nose. I began to wonder what the trouble was. And then, just as I was starting into the crossing, the captain glanced up at me, and he said, well, where's Mr. Bixby? Well, that did the business for me. Now my mind started inventing all kinds of dangers, and it started doing it quicker than I could keep track of them. And then all at once, I saw shoal water ahead. The wave of coward agony that went through me then came near dislocating every joint in my body. All my confidence in this crossing vanished. I reached up and I grabbed the engine valve, and then I dropped it, ashamed. And then I grabbed it again, and I dropped it again. And I grabbed it a third time, and finally, and I gave it a little ring, and I could barely hear the bell myself. But instantly, the captain and the mate together both shouted out, "Starboard lead there, and be quick about it!" Well, this was another shock. Now I started climbing the wheel like a squirrel. Oh, but I would no sooner get turned to one side than I would start seeing dangers over there, and I would spin away to the other side. But I'd no sooner get going to starboard than perils would start accumulating on that side, and I'd be mad to get back to port again. And then I heard the leadman's mournful cry, "Deep four, deep four." In a bottomless crossing? The terror of it took my breath away. Mark 3, Mark 3, quarter less 3, half Twain. Well, this was horrible. I reached up, I stopped the engines. Quarter Twain, Mark Twain. Now I'm shaking from head to foot. I'm shaking from head to foot. I don't know what to do. I could have hung my hat on my eyes, they were sticking out so far. Quarter less Twain, 9.5. We're drawing 9. Now my hands are shaking so nervously I can't ring a bell intelligibly. I don't know what to do. I run over to the speaking tube and I shout down to the engineer, "Oh, Ben, if you love me, back her, man, back the immortal soul out of her." And then I heard the door close behind me and I turned around. And there was Mr. Bixby. Smiling. Smiling a serene, quiet smile. And then that audience down on the hurricane deck sent up a thunder gust of humiliating laughter. Well, of course, I saw it all. Now, I called in the leads, set the boat in her marks, came ahead on the engines. Then I said, "Oh, well, that was a nice trick to play on the Morphin, wasn't it?" I said, "I guess now I'll never hear the end of how I was ass enough to knew there was no bottom in that crossing, didn't you? And I said, yes, sir, I did. He said, very well then. You should not have let me or anyone else shake your confidence in that knowledge. And then he said, oh, one other thing. If you're in a tight place and you, well, don't turn coward. That's not going to help anything. Well, I suppose it was a pretty good lesson, but somewhat hardly learned. The hardest part about it, though, was that for months afterwards, I had to hear a certain phrase for which I conceived a particular distaste. And that was, "Oh, Ben, if you love me, back me."